And we measured the results, and immediately sales dropped by 14%, like off a cliff immediately.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome to Educative Sessions, a podcast series with people in the developer world about their coding experiences. This is brought to you by Educative, which makes it easy for authors to provide interactive and adaptive courses for software developers. My name is Lingo, and I am the host of Educative Sessions. Today, my guest is Oliver Palmer. And the general title of our talk today is going to be The Failed A/B Test That Saved Tens of Millions of Pounds. Oliver, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Lee.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing us into the very exciting world of A/B testing today. It's a subject that a lot of people, of course, know within the tech world, but and honestly, within our own show, we haven't really covered it enough. So, just as a safety, so that we can prime people as they're going into it, how would you describe A/B testing, and what is it? What does it mean to you? What is it in terms of your own practices as a developer?
Yeah, I mean, at a really basic level, A/B testing is the, I think, kind of magical ability to be able to try multiple things simultaneously in a rigorous scientific way and see what works best. And so in my work, that's often working with businesses that want to optimize their website. Anyone that's tried to build a website of any kind knows it's really hard to know what aspects to foreground. For instance, if you're selling a product, what's the thing that you really push the most? What resonates with people the most? And a lot of times people just, they guess, right? That's a lot of business, is guessing and not really knowing. And A/B testing is this, I think, remarkable opportunity to not have to guess and just try a bunch of things, measure the results, and iterate and improve and get better.
Well, I think that's a perfectly clear and wonderful way to describe A/B testing, and I think for a lot of people within the domain, I'm sure that would be very serviceable for our purposes. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of, it's fundamentally an experiment, right? Like A/B testing is about trying something, seeing what works, and seeing what didn't. But the topic of today is about how one test failed miserably, and from my own conception. A failing A/B test is sort of a strange concept, because if something fails or succeeds, there's something to be gained about that. But I want to understand why you framed it this way. So take us to what happened in this particular instance, and when you realized something might have gone really wrong.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so this was a couple of years ago now, and I think the idea of a failure probably that represents the learnings that I took from this as well. But to take you back to where we were, this was, as I say, some years ago. I was working at a telco in London, in the UK. They had a big brand launch, huge company, spent a lot of money building a very sophisticated website, used lots of different agencies, and built a really cool website, but it was really hard to use. And so my work was sort of sitting off to the side of the normal team and trying to find the things that people found confusing, difficult, off-putting, and then running experiments to try and fix those things, to try and address those issues. So one day I was searching through the live chat transcripts. So you've probably seen that, on websites where there's a little button you can click and you can chat to somebody and ask questions, chat to a real person. And I was looking at them particularly right in the start of the shopping cart. So this is really gold for finding objections. People have chosen there's probably an iPhone 6 or something back then. They've added it to their cart. They've decided to buy, but somewhere along the way, they've gone, actually, there's one thing I still need to know. And that suggests that there is a need that's not being met for them on the website. So by looking through those transcripts, it's real gold for finding those things. And on this particular occasion, I definitely struck gold, because I found probably 99% of all of the transcripts of all of the chats that were initiated on that page were people saying the same thing. They were saying, if I sign up to your network, can I move my number across? And in this case, it's like, yeah, you can. It's really easy to do that. So we built up an experiment, which was just like a little panel. I worked with a designer and a copywriter, and we built a little panel that said, yeah, porting across your number is easy. And we deployed that to 50% of all of the traffic that went through to the bag. And we measured the results. And immediately, sales dropped by 14%, like off a cliff immediately. And we ran the experiment for another week or so. We achieved statistical significance and nothing changed. Sales were still just 14% down. And we couldn't work out what was going on here, right? Because we'd found a problem, we'd found a need that's not being addressed. We fixed it, and it had a hugely detrimental impact.
And were you, all other variables were accounted for, right? I mean, was it like a particular sales cycle, or was there something? I mean, that's a huge drop. I would panic quite a bit, wondering there had to have been some kind of external factor, right? Or was it actually due to the test?
Well, that's the benefit of A/B testing. So anyone in business that's tried testing things in parallel. So let's say we put the change live for 2 weeks and we compared that with the week before, or the week after, or whatever, would know that factorially there's so much stuff going on at any one time, particularly in a large organization. But when running it, so it's impossible to compare. But when running as an A/B test, you're seeing two sort of slices of traffic, your control group and your variant group. So they are equally affected by whatever external factors are at play.
So I'm like holding my breath right now, to be honest with you, because I'm like, what is going? This is really strange. Like, I'm controlling for everything else. I mean, it sounds like you've done the test right, but I mean, let's go to the next step. Like, what happened? What was happening in a way after further investigation, I hope that you conducted, that
Mm.
made you realize that it was actually something that was the opposite of what you expected, I assume.
Right. So the next thing we ran what's called an AA test. So that's basically a way to calibrate your tool. So you test nothing against nothing, and the results that you see should be nothing. You shouldn't be impacting any of the metrics. And so we ran an AA test for maybe a week, and the tool was calibrated correctly. Nothing was problematic. Then we ran the test again because we were so convinced that this was a good thing. By this stage, the test was almost a formality. I was excited. My boss was excited. The broader team was excited. We felt like we had found something, a really unique insight into one of the ways that the website was failing customers. We had fixed it, and the experiment was almost just a way of proving how clever we were, right? Um, and the same thing happened again, 14% decline.
Was it like precisely or sort of the same amount kept declining
More or
every
less
time?
exactly the same every time. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And so we ran some follow-up research,
yeah.
and where we landed with it was, yeah, keeping your number, it's kind of easy, but it's also kind of a pain. It's one of those things that straddles sales and after sales, and also your old network has to be involved as well. So this was a few years ago now. I think the technology's got a little bit better now, so it's perhaps more automated, and you just text and you receive a code and so on. At that stage, you did have to call up and talk to someone. So while it was technically easy, it's still a little bit of a pain. And I think what we saw here was just a case of there's a sort of bias, a representation bias in the people that were in live chat. There were a lot of these respondents in live chat. And my thought certainly was, well, for every person that's asking this question, there's got to be 10, 20, 50, 100 who aren't asking that question. And what I take from this is perhaps that's not the case. And what our research told us was that people were excited about getting their new iPhone on a 4G network, and we were reminding them that they would have to do work to get that, and that was prompting them to defer their purchase and just kind of go, oh, this is too hard, I don't want to, I'll
Oh
do it
my.
later.
Oh. Oh, how frustrating. And I mean, okay, I'm tempted to ask about like, once these tests were being conducted, was like sales and marketing just like banging on like, this lab's doors, like, what are y'all doing in there? This is not the purpose of like, setting back so much of our revenue statements like this, but it's, I mean, I want to know from here. Were you able to? I mean, maybe I don't know if any conversations like that happened, but I
Mm.
presume that, regardless of what your position might be in the company, it's not a highly recommended thing to be conducting tests that have such dramatic effects on the overall company's welfare. So, what were the lessons learned? What were the biggest takeaways to be like, okay, we definitely need to learn things, but not do it this way again, right?
I think we would do it that way again because when you think about what the alternative is, right?
I'm restraining my emotions,
Somebody
but go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm just like, what? Like, oh wow.
somebody, a product manager, somebody not in experimentation, perhaps at some stage, they would have looked through those live chat transcripts. They would have had that insight. They would have made that change. Conversion would have dropped off by that much, which, as I say, was millions and millions and millions of pounds at this
Mm-hmm.
scale.
Mm-hmm.
They would absolutely never have attributed it to this change. As you mentioned before, on a really large website, there's so many factors happening at any one time. You might run a big ad campaign or some affiliate activity and dump a huge amount of junk traffic onto the site, which is unqualified, which will drive down conversion rates. You might have a great offer. A new iPhone might come out in this case, and conversion will go up suddenly. There are always these ebbs and flows all of the time, and unpicking all of them is more or less impossible. And I think just based on our own biases, on our own bias, um, something that is so intuitively a good idea like that, no one's ever going to say maybe it's that change and we should turn that off and unpick it. Well, certainly if they do, I think it's going to take a long time to get to that. So the learning I really took from this is A/B testing isn't about wins necessarily. There's a big focus on wins. A lot of the industry is focused on wins. A lot of the ways that A/B testing tools are sold in are based on the idea that you can, chuck in a few variants and it will magically double your conversion rate, which doesn't happen. But what does happen is people in business make bad decisions all the time, and they're not measured correctly. So what I really took from this was the more things that we measure, the more we're going to safeguard against making stupid decisions. And that's probably more of an opportunity for benefit than only testing the things that we think are really clever.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, it's a little bit of confirmation bias there too, of course, right? And I mean, it's such a interesting environment to be able to conduct these kinds of experiments. And I'm having this internal struggle as you're sharing this stuff because I'm like, there's my scientific inquiry which wants to align with you and says, hey, sometimes you've got to break a few eggs and whatever, and then, forgive me, there's a side of me that does believe in, like, the vitality of business and like there are ways to do experiments that are in controlled environments where, or maybe there aren't. Maybe this is one of those situations. All right, my last question will then therefore be, would it have been possible to have done this experiment in a, let's call it a much more contained way so that the impact would not have been as dramatic as it was? Or was this the only way to have done it in order to get the knowledge that you gained?
Yeah, so I think it actually, to your point, it was controlled. So while I say that the impact, it saved millions and millions of pounds by actually detecting this, by trying something, finding that the idea wasn't a great one. So we saved millions and millions of pounds because probably that would have ended up on the website for perpetuity. So that would have had a huge impact. If we think about our experiment duration, it was just a couple of weeks. And we weren't actually testing on everyone that came to the website. It was just in our planning, we would identify what is the smallest slice of traffic that can cover, let's say, 2 business cycles, which is more or less 2 weeks, which will allow us to achieve statistical significance.
Right.
So actually, it was probably more like 20% of all traffic that were exposed to the variant. So yeah, we actively do work to minimize that as much as possible while still getting the learnings.
Okay, that helps me breathe a lot easier, to be frank with you. But at the same time, that's really, I think, what my biggest takeaway from here is that there is almost like a sense of bravado or courage, I should say, not bravado, but it's a bold move to be able to do this kinds of exploration, and I think it also takes, even for, whether you're on the business end or on the engineering/scientific end, a broader vision of, like, being able to see the forest rather than focus on the trees, and that's a huge thing. Very impressive. So, Oliver, those are the questions that I have for you with all this. And this has been really, really fast. I mean, emotionally roller coastery, one could say, but certainly an enlightening conversation. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about whatever you feel comfortable talking about. Some kind of project you're working on, initiative. The floor is yours.
Oh, right. I don't know that I have anything particularly to shout out. I do blog at oliverpalmer.com, and I talk about a lot of the issues around enterprise scale optimization and experimentation. So, yeah, if that interests any of your listeners, oliverpalmer.com is where you can find me.
All right, brilliant. Oliver Palmer, thank you so much for being on this episode of Educative Session. And I'll get over my stress on my own. That'll be my project. But really do honestly appreciate you sharing such a fascinating story when it comes to usually a pretty mundane subject. But I think you've taken it to an 11 and like really made it so much more engaging and on our end. So thank you, thank you. I also want to thank everyone for either watching this on YouTube or listening to this podcast on whatever podcast app that you listen to. You can check out more of our content by visiting us on YouTube, etc. Or you can also learn a little bit more about us in general at Educative by visiting us at educative.io. So for all of us here at Educative, thank you so much and happy learning. Bye-bye now. Hi there. Hope you enjoyed this educative session. Be sure to check out more on YouTube or on any podcasting app. And be sure to like this episode and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Happy learning.